Hey guys, this is Matt Gurney. This is another episode of On the Line. Our election coverage continues. Stephanie Levitz is a reporter with the Globe and Mail, and in recent years, she has been focused, not exclusively, but heavily, on the Conservative Party. So we're going to talk with her about how the Conservative campaign is going, why they should be happy with why it launched, why they should be concerned with some of what's happened since, and why she and I are both getting upset calls from inside the Conservative House. Right after Stephanie, Gregory Jack is here from Ipsos, giving us a snapshot on some of those numbers that are moving the campaign, including a divide among Canadians, not a partisan divide, an age divide. All that and more coming your way right now. This is On the Line. This message is brought to you by Westinghouse. Canada's energy future is being shaped by the choices we make today. As demand for reliable, clean power grows, the need for proven solutions has never been more urgent. Nuclear energy is an essential part of the solution. Westinghouse's AP1000 reactor is the world's most advanced operational Generation 3 Plus reactor. Proven, safe, efficient, and ready now. It can be brought online within a decade, delivering clean, reliable power when we need it most. Building AP1000 plants can strengthen our electricity export capabilities and provide Canada's nuclear supply chain with access to 100% of the global market, all while minimizing the risks of building domestic nuclear energy generation on a single technology. Westinghouse is 100% Canadian owned and buys where it builds, working with over 450 Canadian suppliers to strengthen the domestic supply chain and bring benefits home to our nation. Canada needs energy. Westinghouse is ready. Learn more at westinghousenuclear.com/Canada. Well, here she is in the flesh, so to speak, Steph Levitz from the Globe and Mail. Steph, I've been meaning to talk to you for a while. First of all, because I like talking to you. You're nice. But you're also, on top of being a good reporter in general, you've also had an interesting career trajectory because for a while you actually were in Ottawa largely covering the Conservatives. And I know it's not your bread and butter every day right now, but it gives you some interesting insight here because the Conservatives, and I don't think I'm telling tales out of school here, they probably haven't had the campaign launch they were hoping for, and probably over the last year or so, the campaign launch they were expecting. Before we get into all of the details, though, just lay this out for us. What's your sense on the first week-ish of the campaign? How do you think it's going from the Conservatives' perspective, but even just generally?
Yeah. So from the Conservatives' perspective, I know from talking to people on the ground, Matt, that they thought that the first couple of days went really well for them, that it was a clean campaign launch. There was a lot of energy. Seeing Mr. Polyev out with his wife, Anaida, the two kids, sort of a different energy for the leader than he's had over the last couple of years as he's done the circuit. Some early, their sort of daily rhythm that they picked up, which is the daily rhythm, at least for them, of every major campaign they've ever done. Things seem to be going okay. And then things started to go off the rails a little bit, and going off the rails for a lot of different reasons, primarily this sort of aura of Trump, this other guy, the boogeyman that is over this entire campaign, and watching all of the questions coming at Mr. Polyev, Trump, 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 the drumbeat of Trump. And Mr. Carney basically only talking about Trump and realizing, from Canadians, from what the pollsters were saying, watching the numbers continues going up for the Liberal Party. It must be noted, not necessarily bombing out for the Conservatives. A lot of that Liberal surge is coming from the New Democrats, but that Mr. Polyev was not off to sort of the commanding lead and the commanding presence that they had really hoped for based on the energy of the first 2 days where things seem to be going decently well.
It's actually, you've raised a really interesting point there, Steph, because their campaign is actually going really well. And what people might think that's a weird thing to say, especially even the polls and how the Liberals have opened up a lead. But just purely in terms of the logistics of the campaign, it's gone great. The events are going off as planned. The ground game, as far as I can tell, seems to be organized. I've seen some reporting suggesting otherwise, but everything I'm hearing is that it's going well. They've got a ton of money in the bank. They've got ads ready to go. They've got a calendar of policies they're trickling out. I think some of them seem a bit tone deaf right now, but purely in terms of the logistics of how a campaign goes, this is a really smooth campaign so far. And I'm going to break the fourth wall just for a second here. You and I are recording this on Monday afternoon. It's going to go out on audio on Tuesday morning. By the time that happens, maybe the Liberals will have fired that problematic candidate in York Region who said awful things about having one of his rivals abducted. But I bring this up, Steph, because the Liberals have already had a candidate meltdown and a pretty epic one. And the NDP are now battling anti-Semitism allegations about some of their candidates. The Conservative campaign so far is pretty locked in. It's a really good campaign. I just think they're talking about the wrong stuff. It is like a well-oiled machine that is going in the wrong direction.
It feels to some degree that it's a campaign that was built, conceived, organized, and orchestrated in 2023, except it's 2025. And again, like you say, like the message discipline is there. You can see the control over all of the local candidates not being allowed to post on social media about very much at all. The candidate vetting, as far as I've been told, has been next level, right? We're not going to get, I mean, I stand to be corrected down the pike, right? But at this moment in time, anyway, there's not an obvious issue with that. The campaign announcements, setting aside whether they meet the moment we're in, substantively have been received decently well. Even, and maybe I'm a heretic for saying this, right? The decision not to put reporters on the plane has created an immense logistical problem for sort of the national and even the local, I should say, press corps. But I would argue the coverage is not looking that much different than it would otherwise, with some hiccups here and there. So yeah, it's just that this campaign playbook is being rolled out when the political narrative is completely different. And in some ways, it's reminiscent of the Conservatives' campaign in 2021, where they're campaigning on one lane, except pandemic, except vaccines, except mandates, and just not quite being prepared. And I can recall in that campaign, operatives there being really upfront saying, we mishandled this from the get-go. And I don't know, whenever there's a postmortem done on the Conservative campaign, no matter, if it shakes out in their favor, they'll argue that, see, we were right from the get-go. And if it doesn't shake out in their favor, it will be, we were wrong from the get-go. We'll see.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me because one of the points I've made before is that politicians evolve to defeat whoever preceded them in the job they want. And I think Justin Trudeau in 2015 was a very obvious counter program to Stephen Harper. Sunny ways, my friends, right? Like, Harper was dour and austerity and he was grumpy by the end, and Trudeau was all smiley and, hey, we're going to run small deficits. We're going to prime the economy. Pierre Poilievre evolved politically to be an anti-Trudeau. And then that changed. And the funny thing is, and I know it's going to sound like an endorsement for the Conservatives, and I don't mean it that way. I think a lot of their campaign messaging is fine. And I think Pierre Poilievre absolutely could be the guy who takes on Donald Trump and munches an apple on him, as I've been saying. But he has to make a conscious choice to pivot the campaign. And I keep waiting to see it. And I'm seeing a little bit of it, but it was slow. And I just find it funny because I think my overwhelming number one criticism of the Trudeau government over its almost decade in office was that they were slow to perceive danger and even slower to respond to it. The Conservatives as a campaign seem to be running into the same kind of problem.
I'll tell you something a conservative said to me, I guess, last week, Matt. We were, hashing over this question of people thinking that Mr. Poilievre is akin to Donald Trump. And I don't want to say like Donald Trump. I mean, there is an echo effect there, people associate it with. And this person that I was speaking with, longtime conservative, certainly wants Mr. Poilievre to win, big fan of his, and was telling me how the other day they went and tuned into a late night Poilievre rally, a campaign rally. And they happened to hit play on the online video just as Mr. Poilievre was saying, and I'm going to give you a big, beautiful tax cut. And this conservative said, the message, phenomenal. The language, It's Trump. And so the challenge that appears to be for the conservatives at the moment, they are not Donald Trump. Their policies are not Donald Trump. Their attitude is not Donald Trump. Mr. Poilievre as a person is not Donald Trump. The tone and some of the rhetoric and some of the, somebody made the point, I think it was on social media over the weekend, watching the conservative infighting, say between the federal conservatives and the Ontario progressive conservatives, is like watching Republicans in name only against the Tea Party, it's at all an echo of that. And if that's the people are hearing, that's challenging for Mr. Poilievre because you can't. This is a guy who prides himself, Matt. We've said it. You and I have said it a million times in different formats. He's been the same guy for 20 years. He has matured. Yes, he has gotten married. He's had 2 children. That will absolutely change a person. But overnight, he's not going to change the way he talks without being accused of being a sellout. And if anything, the Conservative Party and their success is built on believing that Mr. Poilievre will do what he says, means what he says, and believes what he says. And that's really been a strength for him in politics, and I think for the political landscape as a whole.
One of the things I wonder is whether or not the conservatives right now, Pierre Poilievre maybe particularly, but probably some of the people around him as well, if they're victims of having a really good 3 years. They were able to overthrow Aaron O'Toole with alarming speed. Like the O'Toole people never saw that coming until it was happening. And then it was done. And then a successful leadership race. One of the points I made before, Steph, is that in terms of head-to-head political battle, Pierre Poilievre repeatedly and decisively defeated Justin Trudeau. Never got to do it in an election, but he killed the carbon tax and he drove him out of office. He had some help from Chrystia Freeland on that one. But overall, Pierre Poilievre, politically speaking, doing what he is doing has gone really well for him. I can understand why psychologically it might be hard to go, well, this got us 95% of the way there, but for this next 5%, we're going to have to do something a little bit different. And I wonder if part of that is just normal psychological pressure and inertia, for lack of a better word. But is it hard for the guy who overthrew Aaron O'Toole to make a sudden pivot to the center and maybe risk being called something of an O'Toole himself?
But one has to wonder, is it the pivot to the center? Like, is he running so right that he has to pivot towards the center? The policies themselves so far are kind of pretty centrist, and they're not particularly different than what Mark Carney is running on as leader of the Liberal Party. These guys are meeting in the middle. Mr. Poilievre maybe in the last, no, I'll scratch that. Like they really have been meeting very much in the middle in terms of talking about tax cuts and pipelines and changing environmental policy. And, Mr. Poilievre will say, well, Mr. Carney, the industrial carbon price, he's still willing to go ahead with that. I would get rid of it. There's distinctions there. So I don't know if it's a pivot so much as accepting that so much of the polling support that was coming Mr. Poilievre's way over the last 3 years and to date was driven clearly at this point by a fury and a frustration with the Trudeau Liberals. And absent Mr. Trudeau as the figurehead of that party, there are voters now saying, okay, well, now I can vote Liberal because I've always been Liberal, because I don't like Pierre Poilievre, because, they have all sorts of various good reasons. And again, it has to be noted as well, the collapse of the New Democrats is a major factor here, right? The Conservatives right now, I think the most recent polling has them like 37, 38. That's high for them. Those are good numbers. But when you have the New Democrats getting squeezed, when you have the Bloc Québécois getting squeezed, that's where it creates a problem for Mr. Poilievre's Conservatives. Sure, he could still pick up seats in the New Democrats, but those three-way split seats, the ones where they're hoping that the vote splits between the New Democrats and the Liberals, the Conservatives come nicely up the middle, snatch the seat, that's the thing that's at risk for him.
First of all, I think that's right. I mean, you've pointed this out already, Steph, but we're not looking at a conservative collapse. The Conservatives are a little bit below where, even within margin of error ranges, they've still come down a little bit. I think that's clear. But what's happened is that the NDP has just evaporated and it's all gone to the Liberals. So A conservative operative I was talking to just on the weekend said to me, it's really hard for us to win this map. He goes like, and he was just kind of like spitballing it. He's not a polling guy, but he was saying conventional political wisdom is that if a party can get to within spitting distance of 40, they're going to win. They'll win a
Mhm.
majority. He goes, with the NDP this week, I'm trying to figure out what we would need. He's like 45, 47. Like, how much do we have to overperform that traditional baseline for a majority in order to overcome an NDP collapse? And he didn't have an answer because he's not a polling nerd, but he was recognizing the fact that this is a really difficult map for the conservatives.
And which is interesting, right? Because it's in some way we talk about Mr. Polyev, in this instance, is he here the victim of his own success? Which is to say that in addition to going very hard after Mr. Trudeau for many years, he was going very hard after Mr. Singh and the NDP. He called him all sorts of names. He mispronounced his first name. He did not try at all to, build any bridges, or not that he should necessarily. They're opposing political leaders. I think a lot, though, Matt, of the Toronto St. Paul's by-election, and when the Conservatives won that by-election, and that really started, that was the starting gun on the end of Justin Trudeau. And imagine a scenario in which Mr. Polyev had not been beating up on Mr. Singh so aggressively for the next little while, for the past while, right? Fast forward to the fall, Singh pulls out of the supply and confidence agreement. If those two men had any kind of a functional political relationship, they could have walked across some aisle to each other and said, listen, it's never going to be better for either of us than it is right now. Let's go. And that didn't happen. So here we
I
are.
just purely as a small correction, Steph, I do believe we're not supposed to refer to it as backing out of CASA. I believe the approved terminology is ripping it up. I think we have to
Right.
describe it in those terms. We're going to take one quick break. We're going to come back in a moment. We're going to continue this conversation, including talking about Pierre Poilievre as leader. So stick around. On the line. We'll return. This message is brought to you by the Métis Nation of Ontario. Its Moose Factory, 1890. For generations, the Métis had been the backbone of the Hudson's Bay Company, working as trappers, traders, voyageurs, and laborers. But in Moose Factory, they did something even greater. They helped build Canada's original economic engine, the fur trade. In the blacksmith shop, William Moore's hammer rings as he and other Métis shipwrights form ships, sleds, and canoes to carry goods and furs across vast distances, keeping the trade routes open. For decades, the Hudson's Bay Company relied on the Métis' ingenuity, hard work, craftsmanship, and knowledge of the land. It was their work that ensured the success of the fur trade and their skills that kept Canada's supply lines moving. From shipbuilding to blacksmithing, the Métis of Moose Factory helped build Canada. To learn more, go to OntarioMétisFacts.com. And we're back. Before we hit the break there, Steph, I'd mentioned to you Pierre Poilievre is a man, and I don't know him well. I don't have a personal relationship with him. Spoken to him a couple times years ago, back in the Harper years. I don't know if I've spoken to him since. You had said a few minutes ago that he is not like Donald Trump, and I think that's really interesting because I agree. If anything, Pierre Poilievre has always struck me as sort of a right down the books 1980s vintage Reagan Thatcherite conservative. Look at the things he talks about in terms of policies or Canadian identity, his own political identity. This dude is not a mega dude. How much of the problem he might be facing right now with the electorate is purely a function of comms? And I know politicians are always like, "Oh, if only our comms were better. We need better communications." How do you ever get the feeling though that like the tail is wagging the dog? Like if you're going to be running a conservative political campaign largely on social media in 2025, they're all going to kind of end up sounding the same?
There's a risk there because there is sort of an agreed upon voice for social media, if you will, right? It's all rage farming. Charlie Angus, the New Democrats, used to say that about Polyev, like the closest he ever got to a farm was a rage farm, you know? It was a funny line. I'm butchering it for sure. But the challenge with being so active on social media, and again, this is maybe like a good analogy, right? Or not analogy, but Mr. Polyev has been on social media for like all time. Like, one of those early adopters. He figured out very early what what gets people going, how to get them enraged, how to get them clicking, how to get them to sign petitions. This is not, it's, I don't know which came first, the Trump or the Polyev, right? When
Yeah.
it comes to some of this social media stuff. And they're different politicians on a lot of levels, but Mr. Polyev certainly works in and operates in a similar pool. I'm trying to come up with the word here. I don't know how to explain, but their audiences are very much on social. And as we know, the algorithm drives a lot of that. Matt, you and I, again, we've talked about it before. There are members of parliament across in every party that I would argue in the last like 5 years have been weaponized by the algorithm. They are completely driven by how many likes and clicks they're getting on their social. And it drives them to do video at like thing after thing after thing that if you took a step back and said, what are you doing? This is not real life. It exists in a different thing. Distinction, I don't know Mr. Trump for sure, at all, period. What you read is that the Mr. Trump you get in front of the camera is the same Mr. Trump you get off the camera. It is different by degrees a bit with Mr. Polyev. How he is on camera can be how he is off camera. He has a personal persona. He's not like a Jekyll and Hyde. You're not getting
Yeah.
one or the other. Who you see is who he is.
Fairly similar. Yeah.
And again, it's always who he's been. And so it's interesting, again, maybe not the right word, when people compare him to Trump, and maybe Trump has always been who he's always been. So they've always been these two guys. They're not the same. It's who they are. And right now, the tone and tenure of our politics, that's who they are.
Here's a completely weird question that's going to come out of left field, but I promise in about 30 seconds it's going to be relevant. Are you a Beatles fan?
Tangentially, let's say
Okay.
yes.
I love the Beatles and their music. And a few years ago, kind of as like an incipient midlife crisis, I went like deep Beatles. Like I started reading all the biographies and the books about them. And one of the things that was really interesting reading about them, sort of in the later Beatles era, was how they were discovering for the first time what you could do with these instruments. Like when you ran them through a filter, or they were like Apple Studios in London was actually designing new machines that you could plug electric guitars into and then modify the sounds in certain ways. I don't know if we've yet really had that moment for social media. And what the reason I bring this up is because if you listen to rock and roll from like the 50s through to kind of the mid 60s, it all kind of sounds the same. It's it's a guitar, it's a bass, and it's drums, and there's not that much differentiation in the sound. And I think social media does the same thing to politicians, where even if you're pretty far apart on the political spectrum, even if your messages are different, your social media campaigns are all going to kind of sound the same. And I think one of the things that I thought was remarkable about Pierre Poilievre in recent years, having again known him a little bit in the Harper days, just a very little bit, and also having seen him in action all these years, the guy has opinions on a wide variety of issues. He's well read, he's policy wonkish. The guy's got a brain bursting with ideas, and he very deliberately reduced himself to a talking point delivery system. And that was a conscious choice. That is not the way he is naturally conditioned. And I remember, again, Justin Trudeau, right? Because Poilievre evolved to defeat him. Justin Trudeau used to get himself in trouble by being sarcastic and irreverent and talking about whipping out his CF-18s. And then he basically realized every time I do this, I get in trouble. So I'm going to speak in a very specific way. And Pierre Poilievre has spent 3 years speaking in a very specific way. Axe the tax, build the homes, stop the crime, verb the noun, whatever it happens to be. All of a sudden, I don't know if that lands anymore. One of the things that I'm wondering about is what his feedback loops are, right? Because I think Justin Trudeau got killed when he stopped listening to a broad enough circle of people, including people who'd go, "You're screwing this one up." Is Pierre Poilievre listening to enough people, including ones who might tell him, "You're off message"? Or is he listening to people who think and talk the way he does?
I mean, also, which people is he listening to and by which I mean this, the conservatives are getting thousands of people out at their rallies, right? These are people who have vested their hopes in Mr. Poilievre, which became apparent during his leadership race. And I remember reflecting on, here's a politician who has always been a politician since in his 20s. He has also always represented an Ottawa area riding. And one of the things that means is you live where you work, excuse me, effectively. You don't spend a lot of time crisscrossing the country. You don't spend a lot of time talking to Canadians in all walks of life and all fields and all income brackets. You focus on the 100,000 and change people in your riding, which is a particular demographic. Then you go into a leadership race, and every single day, because Mr. Poilievre did this every day, he's talking to people, he's hustling, he's signing up new voters. He is standing in a photo line for hours so that everybody comes up and can meet him. This is in the context of the leadership race. I don't think that he's doing the same thing now, but I don't actually know. Over time, a lot of people vest their hope in you, right? And you see those videos. You see the people talking about all the things that are going on in their life, and they are desperate for someone to change things for them. Mr. Poilievre connected with those people. They connected with his message. Is he still trying to talk to them? Right? Are they still in his head saying, we want these things, we want these things? If he went back around to those same people now and said to them, the people that have driven this movement for the Conservatives, and said to them, what do you want? What do you need? How can I be that avatar of hope that I have been for you for these last few years? I don't know what he'd hear back. I don't know if he's doing that work or if it's coming out of, that work is now just a political playbook like every other political playbook. The same is to be said. And I know you wanted to talk about Mr. Poilievre, but I think about this a lot with Mr. Carney as well. Like having traveled with Mr. Carney for his first overseas trip to Europe and watching him a little bit in the photo ops. Conversely, I'm not sure he knows how to interact with real people. I'm not sure he takes that energy that other political leaders take from engaging with the rank and file and people on the ground and average Canadians. What does that even mean? We're all kind of average, right?
I'm extremely average.
Right? Like, so I guess it's just interesting when you think about what campaigns are and what they're about. I know the Poilievre Conservatives are doing focus group after focus group after focus group, right? Trying to figure out, how do we land this message? How do we land this message? But you wonder, for all of them, for Mr. Carney having just won the leadership, it's pretty clear what the Liberal Party wants from him, right? But what do Conservatives want right now from Mr. Poilievre? And what about the ones that were willing to give him a chance before? What do they want from him? I'm not sure it's clear to the Conservatives. I'm not even sure it's clear to voters.
I mean, the voters never know what they want. They think they do, but then they get it and they're miserable. Like every elected leader comes in on a high, and then the voters take one look at the guy in office and go, "This sucks. Why do we vote for this?" Like that's just kind of like this truism. I want to talk with you about another political truism here. And then we're going to get in a minute to the conservative infighting, because you and I have both been covering that from different angles. One of the things that is interesting, and I think you've just touched on it with this idea of 3 years ago, he was talking to normal people all the time. This is not a comment about conservatives. It's not a comment about Pierre Poilievre. This is a comment about politicians, and I've known a lot of them. They instantly forget everything they knew once they get to a position of high authority. When Pierre Poilievre was thinking about a leadership race, he would not have made some of the mistakes I think he's made on this campaign right now. He would not have made some of the mistakes that Justin Trudeau made. I don't think Justin Trudeau in 2015 makes some of the mistakes Justin Trudeau made in 2019 or 2021. Have you ever seen a politician who has done a good job avoiding getting into the bunker? Because I think you're quite right. Like once you're the leader, like whether a prime minister or an opposition leader, you have people scheduling your meetings, your travel, your meals. You're getting shuttled from place to place to place. There's always someone telling you, "Hey, we're already 10 minutes late for this next thing, so we got to go right now. Then we got to get back on track." I can understand how people get lost in that. And I remember reading this interview years and years and years ago with Barack Obama when he was president, and he talked about how he insisted on his staff building in like one night a week where he'd have a couple of hours off, and he'd have like a friend come over and they'd have a beer. And he would ask him, "What do you think is happening out there?" Obama tried to compensate for the crushing scheduling pressure of being president by scheduling in normal time. Does Pierre Poilievre have normal time? Does he have feedback loops that are not coming to him directly through the Conservative Party of Canada's political machine?
Justin Trudeau had that too, for what it's worth. He had a passel of, high school friends, not the ones that were also cabinet ministers, but other ones.
They were the ones that didn't quite make it.
Yeah, that didn't get into politics that I know were very much his check against. For Mr. Polyev, when you ask people that question, it is notable, Matt, for example, that we are however many days we are into the campaign, I guess just over a week now. Mr. Polyev has not even taken a down day. He left Ottawa and has not come back. Um, sure, that's a choice. But when you watch him on TV, how is he going to keep up this pace for another however many weeks we're at? Like, is there no downtime for him? We all know he's a big workout fanatic. I'm sure he's getting in his workouts on the road somehow. But in terms of, who his check against is, often what I hear when I ask that question is that it's his wife.
Mm.
And that his wife is his rock, his lodestone, that, okay, tell me how this is really going. But that's a great role to have a supportive partner in that role. When that partner is on the road with you constantly as well, also looking after your two young children, with respect, I am certain she is a capable woman. That's a lot to put on her.
Oh yeah. But now
That's a
she's in the
lot.
bunker too now.
And she's in the bunker with all
Yeah.
the added layers of responsibility that come, all the emotional labor that comes with being the wife and the mom, right? So that's a lot.
Story of my
So,
life.
right, all that emotional labor you do.
Yeah.
I'm
It's
sure that's a
just
lot. It's
buried in
really
it. Yeah.
heavy. Why you have no hair? Yeah,
It's a heavy burden.
heavy.
Um, Late last week, and I'm gonna have to be vague here, and you're gonna understand why, but I want the listeners and the viewers to understand why. Late last week in our Line podcast episode, Jen and I were talking about the fact that we were both getting calls from inside the Conservative House. And we recorded that episode on Friday and we talked about it. If you haven't listened to it yet, it's our entire third segment talking about conservatives melting down inside. And then we stop recording and we send it off to our incredible producer, Matt. Thumbs up, other Matt. He's doing his thing. And I'm like, I'm going to pick up my phone and I'm going to see what's happened in the last 2 hours while we've been recording. And one of the things that happened was that your organization, the Globe and Mail, with your byline on the story, had published a news story that basically was putting onto the record exactly what Jen and I were talking about. And almost simultaneous to that, Global News had a very similar story. And the next day, the CBC had one. The Line is a small shop. We're much smaller than our three, not competitors, friends that I just mentioned there. But all four of us were hearing the same thing. What do you think has been happening in the Conservative campaign over the last few days?
So I think it's hard to know, right? You talk to a variety of people who occupy a variety of positions and have a variety of perspectives. Longtime conservatives who will look at what is going on right now and say, as we started to talk to, say off the top, Matt, things are going pretty well. Like, I don't know, what's your problem? Like, this is running as it's supposed to be, and people are occupying the roles they've always had. So it's fine, we're fine, everything's fine. You have a group of folks who have spent the last 3 years working their butts off for Mr. Polyev in the official leader's office, opposition leader's office, finding themselves come the campaign completely sidelined, not being spoken to, being replaced by a de facto campaign team. And they're kind of, frustrated with that and saying, hey, we've been 15 hours a day in this shop, and what do you mean you're replacing me with some Toronto outsiders who don't know anybody on the Hill kind of thing. So there's a bit of that going on. There's a bit of, again, a bit of that feedback loop when everything is Trump, 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 and we're talking about tax-free savings accounts, and we're talking about crime and drugs, and not saying the opioid crisis is still not a crisis. Clearly it is. And it's a severe one, but the messaging event attached to it just seemed disconnected from the big narrative. And there's concerns about that. There's people who for a very long time have wanted to help the Polyev conservatives win, wanted them to form government, and are being told their opinions are no longer welcome. We know what we're doing, leave us alone. And then I said all of those things, and then we're going to get to the very public fight between the Ontario Progressive Conservatives and the Pierre Poilievre Conservatives, and Mr. Corey Teneycke deciding to quite literally throw a bomb into the federal Conservative campaign, which begets a series of little bomblets, which are all the people that have been talking to us.
One of the things I noticed on the weekend Because like we recorded our last podcast on Friday, your story, the global news, the CBC, all came out. One of the things I noticed was that the circle of people that are talking got bigger because stories like the ones we've been talking about give people permission to vent. And I think some of it is just the pressure cooker of a campaign. Some of it is the fact that the polls aren't what they wanted them to be. Like, this is hard on people. They don't see their spouses and kids for 5 weeks. This puts pressure on people. But I also think, I've seen some of the social media pushback to the leaks by other conservatives going, oh, these people aren't senior. No, some of them are pretty senior. This is a real issue of concern inside the campaign. And these people, they don't pick up the phone and call me first. I'm not the first conversation they have when they are unhappy with how things are going on the inside. And I can't imagine that you are the first conversation either. People come to us when they don't feel like the boss is listening
Mhm.
because we're a way that the boss will listen. You might not like
Yeah.
it, but they'll pay attention to us.
Yeah. And, the conservatives, this is also, I'll put it this way. Somebody said this to me. I thought it was a point well taken. Some of the criticism that is coming from within the conservative tent about how the campaign is running, and it's personality driven. It's driven by personality clashes over time, blood feuds, old feuds. It's very Shakespearean, really, some of it. Nobody writes this stuff about the Liberals anymore. It's as though it's weird. It's like, you guys are all biased against the Conservatives, and no one's going to do a deep dive into what's happening in the Liberal war room. They're kind of not wrong, but the Liberals, different dynamic, different set of personalities. They don't tend to eat their young like Conservatives like to do. And it's funny, there's a conservative that I speak to from time to time who I really respect and made a point of telling me many years ago now, they will never tell me anything bad that is going on in the party because they feel like it always ends up in the media. Like their bad blood always ends up in the media and it does them harm at the end. And nobody can figure out, if I go back to Mr. Tonight and what he chose to do, lots of folks understand why Corey might be mad at Pierre or mad at the campaign chief, Jenny Byrne, or there's some tension there. Why air the dirty laundry? Why do conservatives always do this? And there's probably some psychological case study into why they always do that. Which is the point is that, yeah, they pick up the phone and they start talking because they feel like they're being disrespected and they feel like they're trying very hard for their guy to win. Nobody is listening to them. And they think that they have valid and good points. And there is tension in that war room.
Mm-hmm.
There absolutely is. This is not, I'm saying it's not going the way they expected. It's kind of funny because it's like there are also conservatives. The minute Trump won that primary was he's going to win. It's going to become president and we are going to have a problem.
Mm.
And there doesn't seem to have been any control for that.
You know what? I'm not in the war room, but I've got a columnist archive and a podcast archive that you can check back going to the fall. And I've been saying that exact message. You're not having a carbon tax election anymore, guys. And like, this is not a statement today. This is a statement we were making months ago. That election you wanted ain't going to happen. And just for the record, Steph, on liberal dysfunction, if any liberal in the war room wants to call me and spill the tea, they know my number. I made sure they had my number so they can call me at any time. There is one more big question I want to ask you, but just to kind of tie a bow on this one, I think one of the problems, Steph, is that the conservatives ideologically are not that united. They are a united conservative party in the old lexicon of Stephen Harper, but they have factional divides, they have regional divides, and they have ideological divides. And I think when things aren't going well, there is no universe where Jenny Byrne and Corey Tenike should not be on the same team, except this one where they aren't. And maybe they should be, but they aren't. And the liberals, frankly, are better at that than the conservatives are. And maybe they lost, frankly, probably almost to the liberals' disadvantage, Steph, because they probably would have done better if they had a bit more of that internal blood sport instinct. They would have gotten rid of Trudeau even earlier. So probably that was hurting them. It's helping them now.
It's interesting. Conservative observed to me during the leadership race, the liberal leadership race, rather, I should say. And I was saying to this conservative, I said, who are your factions? Like, who is the equivalent in the Liberal Party of the various factions that exist in the Conservative Party, like regionally or issue orient or issue set based or whatever. And liberals like, oh no, we don't have that. That's a conservative thing. And so I was telling the conservative this, and the conservative said, yeah, that's because liberals don't believe in anything. That to be a liberal is to be a liberal,
Yeah.
whereas the conservatives in all of their different factions skew towards a similar ideological issue set. And ideological, many people perceive that as a negative, a pejorative term, but they have a set of ideas and values that
Yeah.
inform their politics that they're very passionate about. And it has often been said, was absolutely said in the O'Toole years, that one of the challenges with the modern day National Conservative Party, Federal Conservative Party, is that it's values over votes.
Mm.
It's that people will not for a second sacrifice any of their values if it means that will get them votes. And where that leaves the party sometimes is that conservatives who win 80% of their riding, if they don't win that 80%, they freak out.
Yeah.
But what if they dropped 15% and could pick up 3 seats in like southwestern Ontario? Not saying to and they're like, no, we are not compromising on our values. We do not win by being liberal light. That's how it goes for them. And okay, that's a choice.
Well, we're all making our choices, and then we all get to live with them, is what I've been telling my conservative friends. All right, we only got a couple of minutes left because we've both got other appointments. Just as a reminder to the listeners and viewers, we're recording this on Monday afternoon, and the reason I bring this up is because as of when we record this, Paul Chiang is still a Liberal candidate. I don't know if that's going to be true by the time we release that. He's the guy who had that insane idea about kidnap my political opponent. The reason I bring that up is because I had this crazy thought on the weekend. The Conservatives might win. And I know that right now is leaning off axis with the prevailing narrative. Like there were years of assuming Pierre Poilievre was inevitable. There's been about a month of assuming Mark Carney was going to thrash him. Looking at the way Carney has been reacting to the Chiang situation, and I'm not saying voters are going to march into the polling stations and cast a ballot on this issue, but it's shown us something about Mark Carney and the Liberal leadership campaign. The Conservatives have caught breaks. They've had things go well for them, but this is the first issue I think that the Liberals have handed to them on a platter, and they don't seem to realize they've done it. And the Conservatives, as we've talked about, they're not good at pivoting on defense. They're always very agile about going on the offense. That's the way their party is designed. They will grab anything and be all over it. And I'm not making a prediction, but the last 24, 48 hours, for the first time in about 2 weeks, I've thought, oh no, the Conservatives still have a shot. If the Liberals are this slow to respond to a really obvious threat, the Conservatives will find other things that they can hammer them on. I'm not asking for a prediction for you. I'm a weirdo columnist. You're the reporter. You got to play it more straight than I do. But what do you think the vibe is on the campaigns right now? I'm looking at polls that are stabilizing. The Conservatives aren't dropping anymore, and the Liberals really aren't rising that much anymore. Things are stabilizing. Carney is being kept away from the media. His public appearances aren't great, to put it mildly. And not dumping Chiang instantly is just a completely unforced error. I'm not writing the Conservatives off.
As we talked about before, the polls don't suggest we're writing them off. We could have a conversation about whether or not we should be writing off the New Democrats. That like those polls are just that is the sleeper story, the big story, politically narrative of this election could in fact be the end of the New Democrats. Again, I could be wrong. The interesting thing with Mr. Carney, I suppose, is that when Mr. Carney puts on his prime minister hat, when he gets a social media message from the US president that refers to him as Prime Minister Carney and not Governor Trudeau, boy, doesn't Mr. Carney seem shiny. When Mr. Carney puts on his political leader hat, boy, does he seem rickety, right? That the challenges of both, and this has been said, he likes to say, I am not a politician. I am not a politician. But politics requires certain things, certain decisions, certain actions, certain energy, all of these things that he is very much not skilled at, by evidenced by his interactions with the media. The decision in Ottawa to open a campaign office and bar local reporters from covering the campaign office opening where you would like to be the MP. What? there are things that if a conservative had done that, a conservative had said that, people would be up in arms about it generally, right? And so there's an interesting tension there for Mr. Carney. And he, I don't want to say he gets lucky. I mean, it's not always luck to be the prime minister running for election. Justin
Mhm.
Trudeau, when he had to do it in 2021, and he's both running as Liberal leader, dealing with the collapse of Afghanistan, managing the resurgence of a pandemic, those things were not benefits for him
Yeah.
politically, right? And nobody wants to benefit off Trump's tariffs. Like, no, let's just stop that nonsensical conversation. But if they're going to put Mr. Carney, continuing to put him in campaign mode, and journalists hopefully keep getting access and keep hitting him with tough questions, I don't know how that wall holds for him.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how people respond. And if they look and say, God, I don't know. Now, again, you've said the date many, many times. It is Monday. It is March the 31st. We are headed towards Tariff Day.
Mhm.
April 2nd. It's a big day, big tariffs coming for this country. And
Can't
it
wait.
could, right? And it could be that there's another TSN turning point moment, to borrow a sports analogy, which I never use, but it's the only one I ever use.
You did
TSN turning
great.
point.
It was
Thank
very
you.
natural.
Yeah, I'm like Carney playing hockey in Edmonton.
Yeah.
But that could be a turning point moment in this campaign. It could also not be. The debates could be a turning
Mhm.
point moment. There's lots of room, lots of runway left until voting day or until advance polls start. And that's why this is great about this campaign. I said to a conservative, Matt, and then I'll just stop blabbling, not even a word. That in some ways, isn't it better for democracy that everyone has to fight
Mhm.
this campaign? Because whenever it's a cakewalk, I don't think that's great for anybody. And this is good. This is hopefully people looking at the options in front of them, considering them seriously, casting a ballot based on who they believe is the best leader for this country at this moment in time. And that's great. I hope voter turnout is like off the charts awesome.
You can blabble with me anytime. You're always welcome here.
Oh,
The,
thanks, Matt.
the the only thing I will say before letting you go is that politics, to your point about Mr. Carney saying he's not a politician, politics is the only job where people think it's an advantage to have absolutely no experience in the job. Like if I'm lying on the table and the anesthesiologist is putting the mask over my face and the surgeon's there, never done a surgery in my life before. I am not a surgeon. I'm going to have some questions about that. Like if my dentist is like, I'm not actually a dentist, lie back. I'm going to have concerns. Politicians seem to see it as an advantage. Pierre Poilievre does not have as impressive a resume as Mark Carney, with one exception. He's really good at winning elections. He's really good at politics. And we'll see if that ends up mattering. Steph Levitz, a pleasure as always, from the Globe and Mail. Thank you for this. I'll look forward to chatting with you again, but for now, enjoy Tariff Day. I know it's a big one in your household.
Thanks, Matt. You too.
We'll be back in a moment. Our friends from Ipsos giving us a polling update. We'll be back. Well, folks, over the period of the campaign, the Line and Ipsos are going to be bringing you weekly updates on where the race stands. Greg Jack is here with me right now, Senior Vice President for Ipsos Public Affairs. Greg, I have a specific question I want to ask you. But first, let's start with the basics here. You're doing a ton of polling for our friends at Global News right now. You're providing them sort of snapshot numbers of where the race is. Where do you think the race is? Because I'm going to make a confession to you in a minute, but what do you think is actually happening out there?
Well, I think it's a close race, but I think that right now the momentum is certainly in the Liberals' favor. But it's a long time to April 28th. The one thing that I will say is that right now we're talking about one thing. We're talking about Donald Trump, and I think that there's a lot of other issues behind the surface in terms of what Canadians want to talk about, what their priorities are. But the race right now is really focused on what are the candidates doing about America, and that race is between two candidates, Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney.
I think I understand the frustration of conservatives, meaning official, like involved in the campaign, or even just conservative voters who are angry that people are like, why is this race about Donald Trump? Why aren't we talking about the cost of living or all these important things? And I'm sympathetic to that argument, Greg, but like, I'm gonna quote a song lyric to you here, man. The heart what it wants. And if millions of liberal conservative switch voters, particularly those over the age of 55, and we'll get to that in a minute, if millions of these people have decided that their ballot issue is Donald Trump, tariffs, annexation, Canadian pride and identity, the Conservatives can either fight where the battle is, or they can just complain that the voters didn't want what they thought the voters should want.
Sure. I mean, campaigns are 30 days,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of things that happen before and after campaigns that matter. And we only have those 30 days to adjudicate those. So we can't get everything in. But there's a lot of stuff that I think people should be thinking about right now. One of those things is healthcare, right? Like healthcare is the top issue on voters' ballots, even during the campaign when they talk about when we ask them, "What are you worried about?" But we're not hearing a lot of talk about that. Now I know healthcare is a provincial issue, but we didn't hear a lot about it in the Ford campaign either. When Doug Ford won the Ontario election, all the parties promised to make things better, and then the campaign's over, and here we are. One stat I'll share with you, Matt, 43% of Canadians say that their quality of healthcare in Canada is good. In America, that number is 59%, and that's from our global health tracker, which is available online. So what does that tell you when Canadians are saying that their healthcare is worse than Americans feel? That tells you that I think we have a problem, a crisis in our healthcare system that we need to talk about. And I'm not saying that this is going to replace the Donald Trump or dealing with America question. I'm not. That's a number one issue, and the leaders are right to talk about that. But we have to talk about the structural things in Canada over the last decade that have deteriorated that people are simply not feeling good about, and that's one of them.
And the funny thing is too, just purely in terms of where the Conservatives are strong. Like, because I've been looking at polling you guys have been doing. I look at polling some of your competitors are doing. There actually are a lot of issues where the Conservatives would hold the advantage. Like, most preferred to deal with A, B, C, and D. And 6 months ago, it looked like that's what the election was going to be about. Now it doesn't necessarily, and I think that's very frustrating for people who are passionate about those issues. Like 6 months ago, crime was an issue that was being talked about everywhere. And I, as an observer, just like that's my job. I'm an observer of news and human affairs. I had never heard Canadians talking more about crime and personal security because cars were being stolen out of driveways. There were home invasions to grab the keys, drugs and homelessness issues right here in Toronto, my hometown. People who had been riding the TTC for years decided they were going to stop because of the random violence that was happening on it. That was something that I had never heard discussed so much. And I haven't heard anyone bring it up in weeks. It's
Well,
just gone.
Pierre Poilievre is still talking about it, but you're right. That's one of those issues that I think that was a big thing before the election, in the public's mind, certainly, and now we're not talking about it because this giant thing has enveloped Canada, and that is the threat of America. And so all the things have been pushed down to the bottom of the list. But you look back to the 2021 election or 2019 even more, when climate change was the top issue, and our polling with Global News showed that. Right now, climate change is much lower on the list. And why is that? It's because people are now worried about the things that are in front of them. That's affordability, that's healthcare, and yeah, it's crime. But on top of that, right now, although I will say that healthcare still outpaces the United States threat and Donald Trump than affordability, the things that are most existentially threatening to our existence are number one. And so all the other things haven't gone away. They've just been pushed to the side, but they're going to come back. Whoever wins the next election, whoever is the next prime minister, is going to have to deal with these things in the next 4 years as Donald Trump is in power or more. Because according to him this weekend, he's thinking about a third term. These things don't go away. They just fade a little bit, and we have to reckon with them later.
Greg, I mentioned to you a minute ago, I want to talk with you about those over 55. And one of the things I am observing anecdotally, and this is not data, this is not even journalism, this is purely just an anecdote. We're talking about healthcare a minute ago.
Mhm.
The young care less about healthcare, right? Because they're young and they're healthy, and they slip and they fall and they're sore for a couple of days and then they feel better. Guys our age, we slip and we fall and we don't walk right for weeks, right? Like I understand why the young don't care as much about healthcare, but there are issues that the young are really, really fired up about that boomers will be, or over 55s, whatever you want to call them, don't care about as much. Things like housing or, as I mentioned, some of those public safety issues because they might be housed in really nice communities. I'm not trying to oversimplify. I'm not trying to abstract anyone's experiences based on the numbers here, but it's something you guys have been looking at is something that I think is pretty eye-popping. We as Canadians are starting to disagree profoundly about issues along pretty predictable age dividing lines, not necessarily regions, not necessarily partisan affiliation, but the people I know who are over 55 and the people who are under 40, sometimes to me, it sounds like they're living in different universes. And I had the reason I bring up this anecdote is because recently I was part of a dinner conversation that involved a pretty diverse group of people in terms of their ages, and everybody was in a good mood. It was a nice dinner. But the issues they were caring about, it was like looking at people from different places trying to find out what they had in common. They were almost alien to each other.
We are. We're in a very a very challenging time age group wise.
Yeah.
And you and I were talking earlier about how people our age, right? The folks who have kids and parents, and they're dealing with very different issues and accessing the system in very different ways. But we have ignored some of these issues as they've grown, and we have an aging population where we have not reconciled the difficulty in taking care of our older parents with the requirements for taking care of kids. You've seen already the Liberals in this campaign have talked about raising the age for retirement to 67, right? People are living longer, they're retiring later. Um, but but those generations, the boomers and the the Gen Zers, I guess, or the newest generation, are not seeing these things the same way. The boomers are seeing the Canada they wanted. They have this um, progress over time. We've brought in a bunch of things. And they're like, I paid my taxes. I put my dues in. We have these great programs. Now take care of me. And the younger generation is saying, I don't see an opportunity. I'm not making money. I can't buy a house. My parents have a really nice house. If they're lucky enough, I get to inherit that. But if they don't, if you're a new Canadian that age, you don't have any of those advantages. And so they are seeing a divided Canada where the leaders are not speaking to the same issues when they talk to those two groups. The older generation wants to preserve the Canada that was, and the younger generation doesn't trust any of the institutions that those people build up, and they either want to challenge or replace them and find something that's going to work for them. And that includes very much housing affordability, but a lot of other things.
Yeah, you know what? I confess this. I was asleep at the switch on housing, and it's just a product of my life circumstances. My wife and I knew each other in high school. We got engaged fairly young. We weren't exactly high school sweethearts to that, but we knew each other for a young age. We got married at a young age. We bought a house at a young age. We had kids at a young age, and this put us on that escalator.
It was a smart move.
Well,
A
not
series of smart moves.
yeah, but not through any particular wisdom or brilliance on my part. Like it was just circumstances, right? And people who are the same age as us, but maybe they needed 3 or 4 extra years to find the right person, or they traveled abroad after university before coming back and trying to buy a house, or even just family members and friends we have that are about maybe 4, 5, 6 years younger than us. They're never going to own a home until mom and dad die, and mom and dad have never been living longer, just
Yeah.
again generationally speaking, right? So here I am, I've got my 2 kids and a dog living in a detached house, people who are grew up with me in very similar demographic circumstances, but they're 5 years younger. They're locked out of that lifestyle, and I'm going to use technical jargon with you here, Greg. They're pissed.
It's very technical. Yeah. And imagine your kids. Think about your kids who are going to graduate university, and I don't know how old your kids are, but I think pretty young. In 10, 15 years, maybe they're going to
Thereabouts.
graduate. Yeah. So what's going to happen to them, right? Are we going to fix this, or is the $1 million home, which is now the standard in any major Canadian city, to
Hmm.
get in to a detached home like you have, is that going to become a $3 million, $4 million home? And what's going to happen to the markets when in the period where you were buying your house with your wife and your dog and having kids and everything went up in your house price, the markets went up too.
Hmm.
Right? So, we had this scare in 2010, but or 2008, resolved
Yeah.
by 2010. Um, what's going to happen next? And so younger people who are now in that point where I talked about your kids being in 10 or 15 years, they're going, I don't know what to do. I can't get into the market. I might leave Canada because there's not opportunities here. And my wages, as much as they have gone up because inflationary pressures have forced them to, and the market has responded to that, it hasn't gone up as much as my housing costs. And even if it has, I can't buy into that housing market. And then there's the healthcare thing, which I talked
Yeah.
about. And they're not worried about that, but they will be.
One more thing for you, and then I'll let you go here, Greg. And I told you a minute ago I had a confession for you, and you are right. You've mentioned your latest batch of polls for Global. I've read them, and I've read the other ones that polling organizations are putting out. It's not a great picture for the conservatives right now, but I had this weird sense over the weekend, and it's not a prediction because I'm not reckless enough to make predictions on the record. But I have this weird inkling that the conservatives might actually be doing better than we thought, or at the very least, that they have a path back. And part of what I'm wondering is exactly what you and I are talking about there. Chasing the youth vote is like the electoral equivalent of Lucy yanking the football away. Like so many parties over the years have expected, oh, if the youth come out, we're going to win, and they never do. Are young voters angry enough to show up and vote for change?
That's that's a great question. I will say that I think there's more interest in this election than we've seen in previous ones. I saw something the other day that said, and it was, a poll that we didn't do, but someone did, that 69% or something want to vote this time. We'll see. I think this is a consequential election. I think that everybody needs to be looking at it and involved. I'll give a plug for voting because, we're privileged to live in a democracy and we get to vote. And we've seen a few examples recently of some risk to that. So everyone should read up what's going on, listen to the line, read our global news polls, and decide for themselves. I hope that the young people vote more because their future is on the line, as is everyone's. And I would like to see a high voter turnout for this election. If we talk about this stuff, then we can maybe resolve it. Not always in agreement, but at least we'll have the conversation.
All for having conversations here on the line. Greg, we'll talk to you in a week.
All right. Talk to you soon, Matt. Take
Talk
care.
to you. That's Greg Jack, Senior Vice President of Public Affairs at Ipsos.